We're just 24 days away from the inauguration and what will likely be one of the most important moments of Donald Trump's presidency, his inaugural address. And while we haven't seen a draft yet, we do know some of the expected themes, including education, infrastructure, border security, the state of the military, the economy, and outsourcing of labor. Well, will the first address bring a divided nation together? To discuss that, we are joined by the author of Confessions of a Presidential Speechwriter, Craig Smith, and the director of the University of Virginia's Center for Politics, Larry Sabato. So thank you very much, both of you, for joining us during the holiday here. Craig, let's start with you. One of Trump's top policy aides, he's been selected to write this address. He is Stephen Miller. You've been in his shoes writing for Presidents Ford and George H.W. Bush, leading up to that critical moment when the torch is passed. So just take us through that. What are you going through? What's going through in your head in terms of the message that Trump needs to deliver to the country? Is this one of unity, or is it perhaps something else?
Well, I think the first thing that a speechwriter looks at is the audience, and what is the audience's expectation. The inaugural is a special kind of speech, and it's the only speech of its type. You become president right before you give the inaugural address. So normally the inaugural address is high-minded, but at the same time you want to adjust to what the audience expects. And we know that Donald Trump likes to break the mold, so I think we're all going to be holding our breath to see if he can stay on script and what kind of inaugural address he's going to give. Whether it's one that's going to be highly eloquent and philosophical, or whether it's going to deal with specific issues that his audience expects him to talk about.
Well, let's talk about the specifics. We do know some of the themes that is going to echo, and they have echoed throughout the campaign. We're talking about America first, make America great again. So tell us what's at stake in terms of that main message that he needs to cut through and deliver on that day.
Suzanne, the early word is that they're going to be more nationalistic than ideological, and I think that would be wise if, in fact, that's what they do. The themes that he selected are what you would expect. They're what he campaigned on. Most of them, depending on how he phrases them, could be unifying, and I think that's one of his great challenges, how to unify the nation after such a divisive campaign. And let's face it, he's a very divisive personality. It would be to his great advantage to add 5 or 10 points of popularity, however temporary that addition turns out to be, because it would help with his early agenda in Congress and around the country.
And Craig, you gave us a list of your picks of some of the most effective lines that you believe from previous inaugural addresses. So let's listen to some of them.
Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. My fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Starting today, we must pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and begin again the work of remaking America.
So, Craig, explain why those cut through the noise.
Well, starting with the last one with Barack Obama, where he's actually borrowing a phrase from George Gershwin from a song that was written in the 30s, I think it was kind of unifying. And it was, ironically, the most remembered line in the speech was something he borrowed. In Reagan's case, it's an entirely different approach where you get from the line exactly the transformation he's looking at. He's going to put government back in its place. There's going to be a new federalism that we examine. The states are going to have more responsibility. So the line had a lot of weight to it when Reagan delivered it. If you go back to FDR, you have to realize that the situation at the time was one of terrible crisis. We were in a depression. A third of workers had been thrown out of work. The nation was in a panic, and he needed to calm the nation down. And that wonderful line, with its repetition and its rhythm, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, calmed the nation down and gave it some confidence. So I think those are some of the things you can do in an inaugural address.
And Larry, we know that Stephen Miller, he wrote Trump's convention speech. That speech, as you know, very fiery, audacious, and it gives us some clues, perhaps, what we can take in terms of substance and tone for the inauguration day. Do you think that he will strike that same kind of tone, or will it be more unifying?
I think it would be a mistake to do the convention speech again or anything like it, because of course that was seen as a gloomy, dark, divisive speech, which of course helped to elect Donald Trump. You have to convince people that the current conditions are not sufficient and you need a change, and that's what Trump was able to do sufficiently for the Electoral College. For an inaugural address, again, with this particular individual, Donald Trump, the more notes that he can strike that are unifying, the better off he is going to be, and the better off his agenda will be in Congress and across the nation. Whether he can do it, I don't know. He might get more impact from tweeting it out, which I suspect will be done as well.
That's a great point, Craig. Pick up on that because, you know, I remember the last couple inaugurations, it was pretty darn cold outside. Everybody was just trying to stay warm and stay focused. Of course, it was an important moment. But how important is it, really, the significance of that? Do people take it away? Do they remember what they heard? Or they just kind of get that feeling like, okay, the leadership has changed. We're moving in a different direction?
Well, I think, you know, I remember the 1984 inaugural. It was so cold that we had to move into the Capitol. It wasn't outside. And so hopefully the weather will be better for Donald Trump. One of the things that I think Stephen Miller did in the acceptance speech that would transfer into the inaugural was the closing lines of that speech. What Stephen Miller wrote were lines that concluded the convention that had been themes of the convention every day. Make America strong again, make America secure again, put America to work again. I think those things could be taken into an inaugural without taking the baggage of some of the negative stuff that was in that acceptance speech. So we're going to see whether there's going to be a change and a shift, whether Donald Trump becomes more presidential in this speech as he's sworn in and then gives the inaugural address.
I think people are waiting to see if that transformation occurs. Craig Smith, Larry Sabato, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Of course, we'll all be watching.